Oh, say hello. Say hello, Ari. My kitty co-host tonight. So, hi. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm Chantel. I read books. I read lots of books. And oh boy, I read so many books this month. I read many books this month. I will tell you how many books I read this month. It's a lot. I have a couple of caveats. The first caveat is that most months I'm not going to have this many books that I've read. This is a lot for me. There's a few things going on this month in particular that have led me to read a lot more than I usually would. First of all, it is January, and I do frequently at the beginning of the year get really gung-ho about I'm gonna set a bunch of goals, new year, new me, I'm super motivated, and so I've done a lot this month because I just always am pretty motivated to do a lot in January. Also, this month, in the middle of the month, there was a huge snowstorm and a major cold snap for like a couple of weeks. And so that made it so that I had a lot of time where I was just kind of sitting around in my house, not doing anything, not going anywhere because the streets were crap and the wind chill was 50 below zero and there was just no way I was leaving the house. And so I had a lot of time to read. And also, not gonna lie, I deliberately picked a lot of books, and you'll see I'm gonna go through them all. I deliberately picked a lot of titles that are pretty short this month. If only because, oh my god, it just bumped my tripod with my foot. If only because I know there's some really big doorstopper books that I want to read in the coming months. And so I wanted to like get a head start on my overall reading goal so that when I do read those really big books later on, I'm not going to feel like I'm falling behind. So I deliberately picked a lot of really short books to read this month. So that said, I read 14 books this month. Well, it's still the 29th, and there's still one book that I'm going to finish tomorrow. So that will be 14 books. I will have read 14 books. So yeah, I just wanted to like go through them and talk about them. And also I'll probably talk a little bit about my overall goals for the year as I go through these books. So like every year I try to read 50 books. Like that's just like the goal that I set on, well, first it was Goodreads, now it's Storygraph. So I set, the goal for myself is always 50 books. That's always sort of what I shoot for. I don't always hit it. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I do more. This year, hopefully I'll do more than 50 books. We'll see. Because there's a lot that I want to read. And I'm just really in a reading kind of mood right now. So we'll see. But yeah, so 50 books is like my general, that I shoot for. I think that's reasonable. It's approximately one book a week. Give or take a couple of weeks, which I think is fine for me because, you know, I have a full-time job, and other obligations and other hobbies that I have to deal with. So, I think 50 books is reasonable for me. And other than that, like I have a couple of challenges and a couple of just like reading projects that I work on just to sort of be a little more intentional. I'm primarily a mood reader. So, but I do like to have some titles that I'm like specifically in order to sort of make sure I'm not just reading in the same couple of subgenres all the time, just to sort of make sure I'm stepping out of those boundaries at least once in a while and dipping my toes into things that are not just like fantasy fiction, basically. Basically, I try to read at least a few things that are not just fantasy fiction. So all that having been said, I'm just going to go through probably in more or less chronological order of when I read them. So first off, The first book I read this year on January 1st was The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. This is the first in my sort of personal classics challenge for the year. So again, I've picked 12 classics that I haven't read yet, one for each month to try to read. And so this is the one I picked for January. I've never read Hemingway before this. It was really good. I liked it. I rated it 5 stars. It's a novella. It's like 100 pages tops. It's very short read. It's, you know, there's no plot. It's just a character study. But it's wonderful. The prose is lovely. And, you know, there's a lot of great ideas in it. It's really about, you know, man's relationship with nature. It's about morality. It's about mortality. It's about religion. There's a lot of things going on here. And I really appreciate good prose, and I really appreciate big ideas, and this has those in spades, especially considering how small it is. This copy I picked up at my local used bookshop for a few bucks. I paid $7 for this at my local used bookstore. So that's the first one. Yeah, The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. Good book, 5 stars. The next book I read this year was Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, so about as different from Ernest Hemingway as you can get. I read this on audiobooks. I listened to it, and it was super fun. I rated it 4 stars. I don't know if I need to explain the premise and plot of Legends and Lattes to BookTube. I think most people on BookTube probably know the basic premise of it, but, you know, it's about an orc who retires from her life of adventuring to open a coffee shop, and it's quite nice. I quite enjoyed it. It's a very nice little cozy fantasy read with low stakes, and I have a co-host. Welcome. Yeah, a little bit of sapphic romance in there. I personally really enjoyed the descriptions of the baked goods. That made me very happy in my brain and in my tummy. And I was definitely listening to the audiobook thinking, boy, I want a cinnamon roll now. I really want a cinnamon roll now. And I would die for Thimble the Ratkin. I would die for him. He's great. Love him. Love him. So yeah, that's Legends and Lattes. And then I read a couple more audiobooks, actually. I listened to both of the Monk and Robot novellas by Becky Chambers. So that's A Psalm for the Wild Built and A Prayer for the Crown Shy. I'm pretty sure I rated both of them 5 stars. Let me double check. Yeah, I rated both of them 5 stars. They're great. Again, another sort of very cozy sci-fi novellas about a monk and a robot who make friends, and the robot is tasked with asking the question, what do humans need in this sort of vaguely futuristic utopian society? And it gets into some really great philosophical things. It's super cute. Once again, I would die for Marske, the robot. I love little character studies that just get really introspective and really philosophical and start talking about things like, what is the nature of existence? What does it mean to be alive? What does it mean for your, like, how do we make meaning in our lives? And how do we find ways to value each other? And these 2 little novellas do a great job of that. I thoroughly enjoyed both of them. I need to read more of Becky Chambers. I should probably do more of her stuff on audio, because that seems to be the way that works best for me to digest them, honestly. But I do need to get back to, I tried the first Wayfarers novel a long time ago, and I don't remember getting very far into it, but I need to try it again, because yeah, these two are really good. They're really, yeah, really, really thoroughly enjoyable. So the next book I read was A Restless Truth by Freya Marske. This is the second book in the Last Binding trilogy that began with a Marvelous Light a couple of years ago. I read that like last year, and so I randomly decided, I picked it up like randomly about a year ago at Barnes & Noble, so I picked up the sequel, and it's really good. If you don't know what these are super fun, gay Edwardians with magic. So the first one was two men who fall in love with each other, and the second one is sapphic. And then the third one in the trilogy, I think, is two men again. It's another different pairing of men. I also picked that one up. I'll probably be reading it pretty soon. But yeah, these are super fun. I love the world building in it. I love the way that the magic works. A lot of it is by like using sort of hand gestures and almost like cat. The way I imagine it, at least, I'm not sure if this is correct, but the way I imagine it is almost like Cat's Cradle, because I believe, like, she talks about how when you're learning magic in this world, you often use like string to like learn the gestures until you can do it without the string. So to me, I feel like it's a lot like Cat's Cradle, or almost like a sign language, because she also talks a lot about how magicians, because magicians in this world, magic is sort of underground and secret in this sort of version of the world, so they have to keep it away from non-magical people. And so she talks a lot about how sometimes magicians will sort of use the gestures without any power behind them to sort of communicate with each other silently, as almost a sort of sign language. So I think that's really cool. But yeah, these are super fun. They're adventure. There's adventure, there's mystery. They have to find a bunch of magical objects to keep them out of the wrong hands. Otherwise, these evil people are gonna like take all of the magic in England and use it to some nefarious end or something like that. It's super fun. There are explicit sex scenes in these books, so if you're not into that, you might want to give these a pass. But obviously that doesn't bother me. These are just really enjoyable. I think I gave this one 4.5 stars on Storygraph. I think really the only thing that keeps it from being a 5-star read for me, it ticks most of my boxes. I just, they don't really have much to say in terms of major themes or big ideas, really. Like, she kind of touches on certain things once in a while, but I wouldn't say it has anything particularly interesting to say. So that kind of keeps it from being a 5-star read. But otherwise, I really enjoy these books. I'll be reading the third one probably very soon. I bought the third one as well, so that'll be upcoming. The next book I read was The Japanese Lover by Isabel Allende, I think is how you pronounce her name. Correct me if I'm wrong. I am always willing to be corrected. So this is part of a challenge that's on Storygraph that they do every year. It's called Storygraph Reads the World, and it's literally like 10 prompts, and each prompt is a different country, and you have to find a book written by somebody from that country or set in that country. So Isabel Allende is a Chilean author, and so I picked up this book to give it a shot, and it's just sort of a literary fiction, kind of historical fiction novel about a woman who is Polish Jew, and as a girl she is sent to San Francisco to live with her aunt and uncle to escape the Nazis, and there she meets the son of her aunt and uncle's Japanese gardener, and they sort of form this really close connection that lasts throughout their lives. It's really beautiful novel, I thought. I cried a little by the end. I was crying. There's a lot more going on in it than just, because if you just read the blurb, like I just read the blurb and I was like, oh, that seems like kind of a romance-ish story, like a historical romance. But there's a lot more going on in it than what the blurb says. There's a lot of intergenerational stuff because there's a present day sort of storyline, and then there's the past. We see the past. So we see this young woman in the present who is sort of our heroine's assistant when she's living in this retirement home as an elderly person. And she sort of meets her grandson, and together they sort of dig into her past and learn about this relationship that she's had, and learn more about, you know, all these things, and also go on sort of their own journey with each other. So it's really fascinating. There's definitely some stuff in it about, of course, because he's Japanese, and a lot of this, you know, some of it goes through World War II. The family of the gardener is interned in the internment camps during World War II, and so there's a lot about that. So some heavy stuff, a lot of stuff about death, mortality, illness. There's a character who dies of AIDS. So if that's something that might be triggering to you, there's definitely some content warnings that you might want to check out. There's also some sexual assault content warnings. Again, it's not explicit, it's just sort of in character backstories, some CSA in some character backstories that, you know, be safe, check content warnings, all of that. But it's a really beautiful book. I cried by the end. I gave it 5 stars. It was great. Lovely little lit fic novel that I don't dip my toes into lit fic super often, but when I do, I like it to be things like this that are just really, really good and really profound. The next book that I read, I also read on audio, and it's Certain Dark Things by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This is like a noir crime drama set in a dystopian sort of version of Mexico City with vampires. This is not the first Silvia Moreno-Garcia book that I have read. I read Mexican Gothic a couple of years ago. I would say overall I liked Mexican Gothic better, probably because a lot of it is just that, like, Mexican Gothic is just more my shit than this one. But this one was still super fun. I enjoyed the characters. You know, it's, yeah, it was, I would say it's not anything particularly special, but it's fine. It's not, I would say the writing is not as mature as Mexican Gothic. You can kind of tell that this is an earlier work of hers. But I liked it. I liked the characters. Also, the dog does not die, so that's good. Otherwise, yeah, and I really enjoyed the vampire lore that she incorporates into this story. The way that she describes the different species, subspecies of vampires, and how some of them are indigenous to the Americas and some of them are not, right? Some of them are basically came with the white European colonizers, and they are themselves colonizers of the other vampire clans, right? And so that was really interesting, and sort of the dynamics and politics that she incorporates into that. That was really good. So I really like that about it. So yeah, it was a solid 3.5 star read for me. It's like fun. It was definitely not a waste of my time. I enjoyed it. If it would be your, if that's the, you know, your thing, you would probably like it sort of read. The next one that I have is another sort of twofer, or rather threefer. I am working my way, a reading project that I have right now is that I'm working my way through Terry Pratchett's Discworld novels in publication order. I started in December. I read The Color of Magic. I've read several Discworld novels, but I've never read all of them, and it's been a long time since I've sat down and read any of them. So I decided, just because I want to, that I'm going to read them all in publication order. And this is no time limit on it. I'm not like trying to do it all in 2024. I would think that's absurd. There's over 40 of them. That's ridiculous. I'm not going to do that. But I am reading them. I read 3 of them this month. So yeah, last December I read The Color of Magic, and so this month I read The Light Fantastic, which is the second one, the third one, Equal Rites, and the fourth one, which is Mort. And I'm really enjoying reading them in publication order. My furnace is coming on, so it's being noisy. Sorry. I'm really enjoying reading them in publication order. I think it's really fun to see his skill set grow from book to book, especially in these early books where it's like The Color of Magic is fine. It's fine, right? It's fine. It's emphatically fine. But it does kind of fall apart in the middle, you got to admit, right? Like, I think even Pratchett would have been like, yeah, it kind of falls apart in the middle, right? And then you get to The Light Fantastic, and this one is like, oh my gosh, this one's so much better than The Color of Magic was. Again, The Color of Magic was fine, but The Light Fantastic is like way better. It's a tighter story, right? He really knows what he's doing now in The Light Fantastic, right? He knows what he's doing with these characters. He knows Rincewind. He knows Two Flower really well. And it's just, it works, right? It works better. And then you get to Equal Rites, and it's like, okay, we're not even going to deal with Rincewind anymore, right? We're just setting Rincewind aside for the moment. Now we've got Granny Weatherwax. That's awesome, right? She is so funny. She's so funny. And then, of course, we get to Mort, which is thoroughly enjoyable, and not only is it death featured heavily in this book for the first time, which is, you know, any book that features death heavily is going to be great, but also in this one we can really start to see Pratchett. Thanks for your commentary. In this one we can really start to see Pratchett work with some of the social things that he's going to be talking about. We can see him starting to incorporate some of those bigger ideas that he's gonna really get into later on, right? So this is, you know, this was really fun. I really enjoyed all of these books. I love Terry Pratchett. I love Discworld. If you don't know about Discworld, again, do I have to explain Discworld? Discworld is, you know, a world that sits on top of, it's shaped like a disc, and it sits on top of 4 ginormous elephants who in turn stand on top of the shell of an enormous turtle which is moving through space constantly. And it's the setting for all of his, you know, all 40 plus of these novels, and there's all kinds of crazy characters, and he pastiches all kinds of fantasy and sci-fi tropes, and he has a lot to say about social issues and about humanity and about life. He was such an astute observer of humanity that it's just a delight to read his work. It's just an absolute delight. He just is so good, and his prose is so sparkling and so witty, and his sentences are wild. So yeah, I mean, you got to read Discworld if you haven't. So yeah, working on that. We'll probably have more of those to talk about later as we go on. The next book that I read was actually a middle grade novel. This was for another challenge on Storygraph. So the other big challenge that Storygraph does every year is their genre challenge, where they have 10 prompts to encourage folks to, you know, read different genres and subgenres that you might not normally otherwise read. So one of the prompts this year was to read a mid-grade book with LGBTQ representation. And so for that prompt, I read The Lonely Book by Meg Grehan. Grehan? I don't know how to pronounce her name. I'm sorry. This was lovely. Absolutely lovely. It's actually written in verse, so that's also something I don't do a lot of. I don't read a lot of novels in verse. I read some poetry sometimes, but I don't read a lot of novels in verse. So this is a mid-grade novel written in verse, and it's about sort of a magical realism kind of thing. It's about a girl who her moms own a bookshop, and they live, and her moms and herself and her sibling live above this bookshop, and every day they come down to the bookshop and there's a stack of books on the counter, and each one of those books is going to belong to a person who comes into the shop that day, and they find the people, they match the people up with the books every day, and it's, you know, delightful and wonderful and cozy. And then one day a book does not get claimed, and this causes all kinds of consternation among their family and among their household. And the main character, she has sort of anxiety about it, and she's worried despite the fact that she's so young and she shouldn't worry about it, and her moms tell her, you know, you shouldn't be worrying about this stuff, this is grown-up stuff. And it's, you know, it's delightful, it's poignant, it's about gender, it's about loving people and giving them the space to be who they are, and to you know, it's about self-acceptance and just, you know, the love of a family, and it was lovely. And it also kind of made me cry. Like, I've already read a couple books this year that have made me cry, and we're only at the end of January. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's been a good year for reading so far, let me tell you. So then the next book that I read was Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. Yeah, this was also super fun. Again, I feel like this has been on BookTube a lot. I've seen this on a lot of BookTube channels. I didn't really know what it was. I just sort of randomly put it on one of my TBRs, and then I found it at Barnes & Noble, and I was like, oh, this is a pretty cover. I like the cover. I love mushrooms. I love the purple and green aesthetic. I'm into it. And also, calling it an encyclopedia makes my nerdy little heart sing. An Encyclopedia of Faeries is like, oh, hell yeah, I'm going for this. So, yeah, this was super fun. If you don't know about it, it's a wonderful little cozy fantasy about a woman called Emily Wilde, and she's a scholar in this magical world where fairies are real, and there is an academic discipline studying them, and that is what she does. She studies fairies as a scholar at Oxford? No, Cambridge, sorry. She's at Cambridge, not Oxford. My bad. And so she goes to this place, it's basically fantasy Iceland, to study a very specific and reclusive species of fairy. And yeah, she has adventures. Her academic colleague slash frenemy shows up, and they have a really adorable sort of romantic relationship. It's one of my favorite types of relationship dynamics, especially in hetero relationships in fiction, whereby the woman is just really kind of interesting and cool, and the man just thinks she's neat and is just super into her. So I really love their dynamic, and the contrast between the two of them, and the ways that they complement each other very well. So like, he's super gregarious and she's very introverted, and so he's able to do some things that she's not, but of course she's much more scholarly and bookish, and she knows so much, and he's always so impressed by how much she knows, and it's great. I love it. It was super fun, and I'll definitely be picking up the sequel, which I know just came out. I absolutely have to pick up the sequel and read it pretty quickly here, because yeah, I want to know what happens next. This is super fun and cute, and I also really love the way that the fairies are done in this book. Like, they're clearly very closely based on like actual fairy folklore in Europe, whereby fairies are very mercurial, and they can be very scary when they want to be. and they really like making deals with humans. You know, there's changelings and there's all kinds of creepy stuff that they can do, and yeah, it's great. I really enjoy it. And the next book I read is This Is How You Lose the Time War by El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. This is another, again, very short novella. It's sort of sci-fi, time travel-y thing, sapphic love story, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. I love the conceit of this, which is that they're on opposite sides of a war and they're corresponding with each other. So we get to read their correspondence, and it's lovely. Like the letters that they write to each other are wonderful and beautiful and amazing. And I really like that we don't ever really learn like what the war exactly is about or for, or how it started, or who's winning, or which side is correct, or anything like that. It's clearly just like both sides are clearly pretty equally nasty, and I like stories like that where, you know, war is understood to be just sort of this completely arbitrary thing that is always happening, and it doesn't really matter why it's happening or who's on which side. But you know, the relationship in this is absolutely gorgeous, and yeah, I love, you can tell that at least one of the authors is a poet, because the prose is very lyrical and very poetic. It's absolutely gorgeous. Highly recommend this. It's a short read, but it's wonderful. It's delicious. Highly recommend. And then the final book that I've read or am reading right now, I'll finish it by the end of the month. It is I'm listening to it on audiobook as well. It's Path of Deceit by Tessa, Gratton, and Justina Ireland. It's Star Wars: The High Republic YA novel. I really like the current slate of Star Wars novels. I think a lot of them are quite good, and I'm particularly enjoying the High Republic novels. I think if you're at all interested in Star Wars, or are curious about Star Wars books, I think the High Republic is a great place to start, because it is its own sort of, it's its own separate thing. The High Republic is a period of time in the Star Wars canon timeline that is set hundreds of years before even the prequel movies, right? So we have none of that stuff from the movies is really involved in the High Republic. This is its own sort of thing that's set hundreds of years in the past, during the High Republic era, when the Republic is at the height of its power, and when the Jedi are at the height of their power and influence as well. So there's a lot of really great Jedi characters in these books. Just a lot of great characters in general. The beauty of the High Republic is that because it's a publishing primary initiative, the authors of it were really able to craft it themselves, and were not beholden to the film or television series at all. They could just sort of do what they want with it. So they created all the characters and the scenarios, and it's all very interwoven with each other. I've been reading the young adult, and the middle grade novels. I haven't been worried too much about the comics or the picture books, but they also have a number of comics and manga and even picture books in the High Republic milieu. So Path of Deceit is the first book in the second phase of the High Republic, which is actually set 150 years before the first phase. So this is even farther back in time and introduces us to a whole new set of characters. And they're super fun. I'm really enjoying our heroes in this book. I'm really enjoying a lot of the setups and a lot of the connections. I don't want to talk about it too much, because it's so enmeshed in the High Republic stuff that I don't want to give away anything for anybody who might be interested in reading these books. And even though this is a prequel even to the other High Republics, there's still a lot of connections back to that first phase of novels, so I don't want to talk about it a lot. And also, I haven't finished it yet, so I can't tell you how it's going to end, but I can tell you the direction that it's going in is very interesting right now. One of the things that I like most about what the High Republic is doing is, because it's set when the Jedi are sort of at their most powerful and their most influential, it means we get a lot of different viewpoints and perspectives on the Force, on how it works, and on how people can and or should use the Force, if they should use it at all. And this book in particular, Path of Deceit, has some characters in it that have some very interesting and different viewpoints about that in particular. There's this, they're almost like an extremist sect of like Force worshippers. They're not Jedi. In fact, they think the Jedi are bad for using the Force at all. They don't think the Force should be used at all. They think you should just live in harmony with the Force and let the Force do its thing, which is really interesting, actually. It's very different from how we've seen, you know, both the Jedi and the Sith, right, who are both perfectly willing to use the Force for lots of different things. So yeah, I'm really enjoying that. Path of Deceit is super fun. And yeah, so I'm probably going to continue to sort of keep up with the High Republic as we go on this year as well. I also have one other thing that I want to mention. So I'm doing a year-long readathon. I've known about these for a little while, where it's like, where you, it's a community of people, a book club of sorts, that take an entire year to read one book. And this year I'm doing A Year of Middlemarch by George Eliot. So I've started reading Middlemarch, and I will be reading Middlemarch for the entire year. So Middlemarch is, well, George Eliot is the pen name of Mary Ann Evans. She's a 19th century English author. I believe she was a contemporary of Charles Dickens, so she was writing around that same time. Middlemarch is, she wrote several novels. Middlemarch is often considered to be her masterpiece, or one of the masterpieces of the English language, quite frankly. And it is one of those sort of, this edition is very, very heavy, and it's about 800 pages long. So yeah, I'm doing A Year of Middlemarch. We read approximately 2 chapters per week, and then there's discussions on the subreddit. I'll probably put a link to the subreddit in the description below if you are interested and maybe want to join in, because yeah, I recommend it. There's a discussion post, like it goes up every Saturday basically, and we talk about the 2 chapters that we read that week. And it's super fun. So yeah, we're only 5 chapters in. I'm approximately 50 pages into this 800 page behemoth, and I love it. It's amazing. The characters are incredible, like incredible. The prose is spectacular. Honestly, I was going into this, I was a little bit worried that I would be able to keep my interest up in the book. I wasn't sure how I would do reading this book. It's been a while since I've read a good chonker 19th century Victorian novel. But actually the problem I'm having is I don't want to stick to just 2 chapters per week. I want to read more. I want to go through it faster. So I'm having trouble actually keeping myself to just 2 chapters a week, because it is already so good. Like, she has hooked me. These characters are so interesting. She really knows what she's doing, and she's laying out very clearly the themes that she's dealing with and the kinds of issues that she's working through. Yeah, I'm really loving it. This is great. I can't wait to find out what happens next with Dorothea and Celia Brooke, our two sisters. I'm enthralled, frankly. This, you know, I probably doesn't have much of a plot. Again, it's a Victorian novel. It's about a town, a fictional town, and you know, I know there's going to be a lot more characters involved in it even as we go on, but we're starting mostly with these two sisters, and you know, they're both fascinating characters with rich inner lives, and I can tell already we're going to be talking a lot about gender roles and gender expectations in courtship and marriage, and you know, the roles of husbands and wives, and it is just very much my shit. Very much my shit. So that's what I've got. So I'm going to be working on that throughout the year. And if, you know, anything pretty interesting happens, I might do some more videos talking about my progress in this book as we go. Who knows? We'll see. If people want it, I'll do it. And then I'm also in the midst of reading, I haven't finished it yet. I will finish it in the next few days, probably. This is Salt, A World History by Mark Kurlansky. This is nonfiction history book. This is another prompt in the Storygraph genre challenge, which is to read this year, which is to read a nonfiction book about food. This has been on my TBR for years. I'm enjoying it so far. Like in like a day, I've gotten like 48 hours. I've gotten halfway through this book. I'm just devouring it. Like a piece of salted cod. No. So I'll probably have more to say about it once I'm finished, but I'm enjoying this as well. And yeah, I don't want to talk too much about what I have coming up. I don't really do TBRs much. I'm mostly a mood reader. I mostly just kind of read what I feel like reading at any given point. But I definitely have a number of books sort of on deck that I want to read in the coming weeks, particularly. So yeah, that's really all for me. That's my January reading. It's been kind of insane. I'll probably be slowing down a little bit as I get into some of these bigger, thicker, heavier books. But yeah, let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books and liked them. What was your opinion? Or if you didn't, even if you didn't like them, let me know. Let me know what books you've been reading this January, what some of your favorite reads in the past few weeks. Yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye.